In On the Origins of Species, you will join the Beagle's journey through the Galapagos Islands. You'll be carrying out research on the island's habitats. And you'll be using your observations to discover the natural history of the species that you encounter. These discoveries will gain you points, give you powerful cards, and move the Beagle along the path. Cards can give you knowledge in different habitats, gaining you points at different objectives throughout the game and the end game. Or they can give you different research or maps that allow you to get harder to find species or even give you special one-time use abilities. Because as the Beagle moves around, different objectives will be triggered by the player that moved it there. And the game has many different objectives that will trigger throughout the game and is randomized each game. And there's also variants for an advanced game and a family variant. To set up, first you'll place the board in the middle of the table where everyone can reach it. Next, each player is going to select a color to be for the game. They take the 8 observation cubes and the turtle scoring marker for their color. Any colors not used can be placed back in the box. All players' turtle scoring marker can be placed at the scoreboard in the upper left-hand point of the board, and it doesn't matter how they're stacked. Next, you're going to find all the species tiles. Now these tiles have different levels. Levels 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, in addition to all these tiles, there's also going to be 3 starter tiles that are these 3 different colors and have these icons on the bottom left of them. For right now, we're going to be mostly concerned with these as we're going to place these starting tiles out. In order to see where those go, you're first going to set out your Darwin's Journal cards. Now, as you can see left to right, there's different levels of these cards ranging from 0 to 4. You're going to want to put them so that all of the same ones of the same level are in the same stack. Now for your first game, you're going to flip over all the level 0 cards and you'll look for the one that has the Beagle ship in the upper right. This is the one that you'll use for your first game. And you'll place those starting tiles using this map into a specific square. Also on the board it actually has the spots for these for your first game. Now this card itself doesn't stay on the board, I'm just showing you this as setup. Because once you've used this level 0 card, that card and all the rest of the 0 cards can go back to the box. You don't need them for the rest of the game. Now for these level 0 cards and the other level cards I'm about to show you how to set up, remember for the first game we used the card with the Beagle in the upper right. In future games, you can shuffle this stack and randomly take one card and complete the setup as shown. Next, you're going to go through the level 1, 2, and 3 Darwin's Journal cards and look for the card with the Beagle in the upper right. And you're going to place those cards on the bottom right of the board in the corresponding spots, but you're going to place them face up. So it will look just like this. You can return all the other level 1, 2, and 3 cards back to the box. Now based on these cards, you'll see there's different dates. This is 923, 1835, 929, and 1018. You'll find each of those dates in a circle on the game board. You're going to place one of these objective markers right on each of those 3 dates. This tells you when these objective cards that we just showed you, those Darwin Journal cards, are going to trigger throughout the game. You'll then go through the level 4 Darwin's Journey card and also place the card with the Beagle in the upper right in this spot face up. The rest of the level 4 cards can go back to the box for your first game. Next, you're going to shuffle up all of the rest of the species tiles. You're going to draw randomly 7 tiles after shuffling them, and you're going to place them in this spot here on the left of the board, each of them taking up one of these squares. Now you're going to want to make sure that the tiles that you place, the orientation has sort of the book and the leather bound aspect to the right of the tile, also meaning that you'll see a turtle with points on the bottom left of all these. All of the rest of the tiles that you've shuffled, place into 3 equal stacks. Remember, they're shuffled, so they're randomized. Again, making sure that all the tiles have this sort of leather-bound book on the right side. And keep in mind that the tiles are placed on the board from top to bottom, from highest scoring, 4, all the way down to the lowest scoring, 1. In the upper right of the game board, you'll see a spot for the habitat decks. This is land, water, and air. You will find those decks, you will shuffle them up, and place them on their respective spots on the board. Just below those, you'll see a spot for the Beagle deck. You'll find those cards, shuffle them up, and place them in a deck face down right here. Then you'll take the top 3 cards, face up, and place them in those spots. And just below the Beagle deck, you will actually place the Beagle itself, which is this ship, and you'll start it right in South America. Now the player who is most recently on a boat will be the first player. They get no starting bonus. The players are going to be going in a clockwise order, so the next player clockwise of that first player receives 1 point and moves their point marker up 1. If there's a third player, that player will take one of their observation cubes and place it on one of the 3 starting species tiles. Now, don't worry about where to place it now. You can wait till after you get to the end of this rules video to figure out where you might want to place it strategy-wise. If there's a 4th player, that player will also get 1 point, and they can place one of their observation cubes on one of the 3 starting tiles as well. The object of the game is to have the most points in the end. And you'll mainly be getting points by discovering new species by spending research observation cubes in order to place new species tiles and gaining points. You'll also score points as the Beagle reaches the different objective markers, and these cards are different every game. We'll go over these ones in more detail later. You'll also be scoring points at the end of the game for different set collections of books depending on the card that was drawn for that game. And we'll talk more about how you get these book cards later. Turns go in a clockwise manner, starting with the start player. On your turn, you simply have 2 choices. You can either research or discover. Now, when you research, you're going to take 2 of your research observation cubes, which are these ones, and you're going to place them on species tiles that are already outplaced on one of the spots out on the board. Now, in doing this, you must place them on different species tiles. You cannot place them on the same, and it doesn't matter if there's cubes of other players or even if there are previous cubes of yours on that tile as well. You can place them as long as they're on different tiles. And these observation cubes are going to be spent later to help you discover new species. And if you want to place some of these observation cubes and you don't have any left in your supply, you can take them from other species tiles. Now, after researching, it would be the next player clockwise turn, but instead of researching, let's say you wanted to discover. When you discover a species, it has to be one of the 7 that are already in this column of the board. You cannot select the top 3 in this column unless you have a map as indicated here. And maps can be found from the cards that you can get, in this case, the Beagle deck card. We'll talk more about cards later. Now, the upper left shows you the cost of research observation cubes it needs. In this case, it needs 2 cubes of the air. Now, in this case, we're going to show you placing it in an available spot, which is a spot that is open, meaning there's no tile there. Now, if we look at this again, we need to have 2 observation cubes of the air type, and we're purple. Now, we have one here and we have one here. Now, we have a purple cube here, but it's not of the air type. And because we need to spend 2, we could place this here because it has to be adjacent to our cubes that we're spending. Here are the 2, it needs this, so this is okay. It would also be okay here because it's adjacent to both of those. We could not put it here because this is 1 for air, but this is not air, so we could not spend this because we need 2 of those. So right now our 2 options are here and here. Let's say we place it like this. We would spend these cubes, these would just come back to us in our supply. Now on the bottom left, this shows us 1 turtle. This means we would move 1 on the score track at the top of the board. This next one here tells us that we get to take an air type card in the upper right of the board. So you're simply going to draw this card, keep it secret from others. We'll go over what these cards do later. And lastly, you would move the Beagle 1 spot. Now, conversely, if we had finished this tile, we would have gotten 3 points. We would have chosen between a water or air card. We would have gotten a Beagle card, and we would have moved the Beagle twice because there's 2 arrows there. So when you move the Beagle, you're going to simply follow the lines. In this case, we just moved it 1, so it goes to 9, 15. However, let's say it was here when we did that. Now the Beagle is going to move 1, and it's going to touch or go right on top of where this objective marker is. Now that means this first objective is going to be the one that triggers, and in this case, the person that moved that Beagle will get a point. When it gets to the second one, that player gets 2 points. When it gets to the third one, this player gets 3 points. Now remember, these are just the starting basic cards for your first game. In other games, these will be randomized and they'll have sort of more things going on with them. And when you get to those more advanced cards, you can check out the appendix on page 10 that talks about the Darwin Journal cards. And finally, you're going to flip over the tile that you just placed. This now becomes a tile that players can research. On your turn, if you're researching, this is a tile you can now place observation cubes on it because it's going to give you air. Then you will place one of these new tiles. Now you can choose any 3 that's on the top and you'll place it in this column. Now what you do here, let's say we want to place this one. It has a level 2. We will look for the top one that's in level 2. Remember, these start at 4s and goes 3s, 2s, and 1s. They go in that way. So we'll slide all of these down because this is between 2 and 3. This is going to slot in at the top one of this level. So we go just like that. Earlier, I showed you an example of discovering that was a pretty basic one. Let's show you one that's a little more involved. Let's say we want to discover this species. We're going to put it in this open spot here. Notice it's adjacent to all these 3, and we're going to be the purple player. I'm going to show you how this works. So for example, we could spin both of these cubes. Each of these is giving you 2 water and 1 air. So if we spend both of these, we're going to have 4 water and 2 air. So we actually have more water than we need. And when you spend more than you need, you don't get to hold on to it to future rounds or anything like that. It's essentially the extra is lost. So we fulfill this. We now fulfill this because 2 of these cubes is 2 air. And now all we need is land. We could take either this one or this one. In both cases, we're sort of having some extras that we're not using. Now in that case, we spent one of these 2 cubes in either this or that, meaning that we spent 3 cubes in total. You don't have to spend all the cubes off a tile. You could spend just this one, which would give you 2 water and air. This one, which gives you 2 water and air. So we're at 4 water and air and a land. So all we need is 1 more, and we could spend this one as well. So the same thing of spending 3 cubes, but you can decide where they come from as long as you fulfill what is there. At that point, you'd follow all the rest of the steps that I taught previously when making a discovery. Now, before I showed you discovering a new species into an available space. Now, instead of doing that, you can actually replace a species tile when you discover. So let's say, for example, we want to discover this species that's in that column down there. We didn't need a map to do it. Up here we need, in the upper left, we need 3 water and 2, that symbol there is sort of wild, 2 of anything. So I'm just going to leave this here now just for the ease of teaching you how this works. Now let's assume we are the orange player here. Now we have 3, 1, 2, 3 water, and we have 2 anything right here. So we have enough. Each of these 3, we'd have to use all of these. And now it still has to be either adjacent to where you're getting these cubes from, or you can actually replace an older species tile. Now this is a level 2 card, and you know that because it's worth 2 points. This is a level 1 species because there's only 1 icon there. Because when this one flips, it's level 2. You'll see this one has 2 icons there. So when you replace, you do it the same way as before, but there are some differences. Number 1, you must replace a tile that's of a lower level. This was a level 1, and this is a level 2, so we can replace it with this. And in this case, you can replace a tile that you're getting cubes from because they're considered adjacent. So let's say we're going to place it right on here. We're going to spend all of these cubes to get this, and we're going to place it on here. Now there's already another player's cubes here. When you place this on here, this player gets the cube back, and they'll actually get a point for each cube returned to them this way. Now the player that discovered this actually gets to take this tile to themselves. This will be put in front of them. It'll be worth a point at the end of the game. And then you'd follow all the normal things that I showed you before, getting points, cards, moving the Beagle, refilling the row, and things like that. Now you'll notice that level 4 cards, when you flip them over, they don't have any icons, which means you cannot place knowledge cubes on here, nor can they be replaced by a higher level, as I just showed. Now, if you're replacing one of the starting tiles, it's considered a level 1 tile. However, they don't get removed. In this case, you simply replace it with the tile that you're discovering. You move this to an adjacent empty spot. The cubes stay on there, and then you will then discover this and follow the instructions as normal. Now, earlier we mentioned that you cannot discover any of the species in the top 3 unless you have a map as indicated on the board. And as you've seen, there's different ways to draw cards as rewards for discovering new species. Over the course of the games, you're going to get different cards like this, and they're in your hand secretly, but on your turn, you can play as many of these cards that you want to, and they do all sorts of different things. The maps, you just place it in front, and for the rest of the game, you can find species in that top 3 as I just mentioned. The books are going to help you with set collection for different points throughout the game at different objectives in the end game. We'll talk more about that later. And some of them give you, specific actions. Like this one allows you to place an observation cube on any tile and then move the Beagle 1 space. Now when gaining a Beagle tile, you can take one of these face up ones and it's replaced immediately. Now the cards from the land, water, and air deck do different things. Some of them give you books of different colors. We'll talk about that for endgame scoring. Some of them you could just play and just have basically 2 of the land towards discovering a new species. Same for water, same for air. Some of them actually give you different character abilities that are one-time use. Like this one allows you to move one of your observation cubes to any tile and move the Beagle twice. And feel free to check out Appendix 1 on pages 8 and 9 to see what all these cards do. Now when the Beagle gets to the end and gets on the level 4 card, which is the end game objective, then the game ends immediately. Now these end cards do different things, but this one says for each of the habitat types, whoever has the most books of that type will get 6 points, second place 3 points, and third place 1 point. For example, if I had the most land green books, I have 2, 4, 6, 8 of them. Let's say I was in first place, I'd get 6 points. For the yellow books, I have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's say I was in second place, I'd get 3 points. And let's say I was in third place for blue with 2 books, I'd get 1 point. Now, if players are tied, then they combine those spots and round down. For example, let's say there was a tie, 2 players were tied with the most. You'd add 6 plus 3 is 9, you'd round down, which essentially each player would get 4 points. And then the next player would basically go for the third place award. Then you'll look at each species tile on the board, and the player who has the most observation cubes will get to keep this tile in front of them. It's going to be worth a point at the end of the game. If it's tied, then neither player gets that. And so each player is going to get a point for each tile they have as well, regardless of the level. And now whoever has the most points is the winner. Now if it's tied, the player that has the most books on all of their book cards wins. And if it's still tied, it's the player who was last in turn order. Now earlier in setup, we gave you the most easiest starting mid-game goal cards. Let me show you one of the ones that's a little more involved. This one uses what's called a local expert, which means whoever has the most observation cubes next to, adjacent to this location will get a certain amount of points. If you're in first place, you get 4 points, second place, 2 points, third place, 1 point. So we look at this location here, it says 9, 26, 27, and this is the objective marker for that. So once the Beagle comes down here and gets to here, we would look at that and we'd look at the adjacent tiles and see who has the most. Well, orange has 3, they'd get first place with the 4 points, and gray would get second for 2 points, and purple would get third place, 1 point. And if you have more questions about the mid-game and end-game goal cards, you can look at them on page 10 in the rulebook. And feel free to check out page 11 of the rules for an advanced game variant and a family variant.